All right. So what we're going to do in this lecture, I'm going to show you how we determine collision in game development. Now, in game development, collision is very critical, very important, because this is how you determine, like if you're trying to shoot something, or if you're trying to hit something, or if you're close to a wall or a door, can you go through a door or not? So this is just a simple example, a simulation, building on the previous example that we did. So what do we have is that we have, for example, we have this box. In reality, later on, I'll show you how we change this into images. But for now, just to explain the concept, we have a canvas, we have two rectangles. We call this is like object one, and this is object two. And this is the example we did before, how to move a box around the screen. Now, what happens is that if you get close to this, you should be able to say that I touched that object, or maybe if you're trying to kill a monster or avoid a monster, you go around him and so forth, right? So how do we do this part? Now, I put the project already on GitHub. I will put the link in the video. So this is the address for it, GitHub, BridgeC 1113, and this is the game development, and this is that file, the startup file that you have. I'm going to explain this file first, and I'll show you how we determine collision. So if you go to the code, after you download it, what do we have? We have, again, we've done something similar before. We have a canvas, and this canvas has an ID. It has a width and a height 600 by 600. And then we have a script that means we determine when you press the key, right? So when on key down, we call this function called process key. Now, this example is different than the one that you saw earlier. And the reason is that you see that you have a draw function. And if you look down, the draw function it has all the drawing features in your code. Why do you do this? And I'll tell you, in game development, usually there's a cycle. Usually you draw, you have like something that is repeating, a loop, an infinite loop. You draw, then you update the status, like you move things, and you draw again. You check your logic, and you draw again, all right? So that is what typically happens. So we break the code into functions. So the first function that I'm going to do is that I'm going to draw the screen. What do we draw on the screen? We draw the screen. This is my canvas. I'm going to fill the background with the width and the height of the canvas. Here is my object. So object one and object two. Those are the two yellow things that you saw on the screen. And they have XY, width and height, XY and width and height. And this is that small rectangle that I move around the screen. So that's the first thing happens when you draw on the screen, all right? And the second function that we have here is that when you update, this is when you press the key, and we did a video on that one. So if I press the left key, I subtract 20 from X integer, and here I subtract, I add to X, subtract from Y, and add Y to Y. This is depending on the key. This is the logic of the game. This is that you're actually updating the position. Now, after you update we call these sprites status, then you draw the game again. So I don't have to repeat the code of drawing in here and in here. All I do is I just simply call the function that is responsible for drawing, and whatever the status of these sprites or these objects, basically it draws them again in here, all right? So that is what this class does, this code do. What do we need to do? What we need to do is that we need to determine if I actually hit these objects or not. So we need to determine collision. How do we do that? If you go back to the code, if you go back to the screen, so notice I have this, I'm moving. Every time I hit the key, I'm adding or subtracting 20, either X or Y. Now, if I get close to this, now I'm inside the boundary of that box, inside that boundary. Same thing in here. When I move around, I'm inside the boundary of this box, right? You could get you can do that from all these different directions. So the idea, how do I determine if I am in the boundary of this object or not? Well, how many objects do we have? We have 2 objects. But in reality, in games, you have many objects, and each object has positions and it has sizes. So for now, I'm going to do it simply for this. And as we advance more and more in the gaming, then you'll see how we can actually, if we have many things flying on the screen, how we determine which object we are hitting. All right. So what we want to do, I want to do first, go back to the code. We need to determine if I actually what? Hit the object or not. If I hit the object or not. So what do? You check in here and say, you need to check. You can do the checking before or after, but you need, there is a difference. There is a difference if you check before or you check after. All right, I'll tell you in a minute why. Okay, so if I, for example, if I did this, if I say, okay, depending on what the user pressed, I need to determine if I am in this object or not. How many objects I have? I have object 1 and object 2. So object 1 has boundary. It has X, Y, and width and height. So if I am between the X coordinates, which is what? 100 and 100 plus 200 is 300. And I am between, the Y coordinates is between 100 and 150. That means I hit the X, the first object. All right, so I'm going to do an if statement here. This if statement goes like this. It says, before we draw the game, you can say if what? If X int is greater than or equal to 100, that means either I touch the boundary or I'm inside the boundary, and X int is less than what? Less than, what do we have? 100 plus 200 is 300, right? Remember, it was 300. So that's my first part. The second part is what? This is for X, and I need an AND condition for Y. And I say Y int, and I have a problem with naming this variable. That's okay. Y int is greater than what? Greater than, was it 100? Yeah, Y is 100, between 100 and 150. So Y is greater than 100, and Y is less than 150. You can say less than or equal is fine. What does that mean? That means I actually hit what? I hit the first object. So you can say hit the first object. Right? Now what we're gonna do, you can actually put an alert, you can change the color of the object, you can make that object explode, you can actually reduce the health of that object, whatever it is, right? Depending on the game, the logic game that you're trying to do. Now, I'm gonna do an alert first, and I'll tell you why we're doing that. Alert, object 1 is hit, right? And I can do this for the second object. And what do we have? We have a problem here. We have Y int here, right? And we can do the same thing for the second object. The only thing that is different here is parameter. Now, obviously, this is not the proper way of doing it, but it's okay for now because I'm trying to explain to you how do you do collision detection. What do you do with this? You say instead of 100, 100, the X is the same. Notice X and between 1 and 100, that's fine. The only thing is different, it's Y, between 400 and 450. Okay? So Y is between 400 and 450. We have a problem here. That should be 150 here, not 100. Okay, 150. All right. And instead of object 1, we're going to say object 2. All right? Is that clear? Yeah, so now let's test it and see what happens. If I go to my browser again, refresh this, and then notice what happens. If I click on this, now if I get close, we didn't get, I got there. So there's a problem with my if condition. Notice the problem is that I'm already in the box when I got the message. Okay, it shouldn't do that. It should be the minute that I hit the box that I get that message. As long as you're in here, you will get that message. Okay, you get that? Now, if go around this and go to the next one, even there's a problem with this one. I'm getting the message before actually I got the message, then I get into it. That's okay, okay? But we have, so this one, it says object 1 is hitting. But you get the idea, right? Now, obviously, you don't want to do this. You don't want to say that you're still in this object. See here, we didn't get that message until we actually way into that object. Okay, so maybe there's a problem with our condition. We need to look at our conditions. All right. So if we go back to the code and check this, okay, see here, it says greater than. So it says greater than or equal, because what if I just hit the edge? Same thing in here, greater than or equal. So that would solve that problem. Sorry. I don't know why it's showing that. Anyway, so if I go back in here, now notice if I do refresh, notice now, we're still going to get this, but that's okay. We'll fix it in a minute, okay? So as long as you do this, you're always in that, you get these messages. Now I got that message too. That solved that problem. All right? So that's how we do determine collision. But obviously getting these messages on the screen is not a good thing. I want to be able to draw something on the screen, on my canvas, like a text. Maybe I'm keeping a score. Maybe I want to show the status of my game. So instead of doing this, maybe I can draw a text on my canvas. All right. So how I'm going to draw a text in the canvas? I'll show you that in the next part. Okay.